Students, as we all know, population is dynamic. In other words, the numbers of population is changing every second. The distribution, composition as well. Students, how do you think this happens? Yes, this happens as a result of the births, the deaths and migrations. When it comes to the change in the size of the population, it is the difference in the number of inhabitants of a country or a region during a specific period, maybe during the last 10 years. These changes are shown in two ways, one as absolute numbers and two as percentage change. The absolute numbers that get added every decade point out the extent of increase.
In other words, population change in absolute numbers is equal to population at later date minus the population at earlier date. If the resulting number is positive, there is an increase in the population. In case there is a negative result, it means the population has decreased.
Students, now let us see how population change in a place is calculated.
In other words, population change in a place is equal to the number of births plus number of in-migrants minus number of deaths plus number of out-migrants. Migrants, as we all know, are the people who move from one place to the other in search of work.
In case the population change in a place is a negative number, it simply means that it has decreased by that number. Students, let us assume there is no migration at all. Then what happens? In case there is no migration, the population change can be calculated by taking the birth rate and the death.
Birth rate is the number of live births per 1,000 persons in a year. For example, the birth rate of our country was 29 in 1992. This means that 29 live births took place for every 1,000 people living in the country. Death rate is the number of deaths per 1,000 persons in a year. The death rate of our country was 10 in 1992. It means that 10 deaths took place for every 1,000 persons in that year. So the population change can be calculated by subtracting the birth rate from the death rate, which gives us 29 minus 10, which equals to 19. This means for every 1,000 people, 19 people were added during that particular year. The population change that we calculated can be expressed in percentage as 1.9%, which translates as population growth rate of 1.9% for 1992.
Students, the rate of increase of the population is very important.
The rate of population is given as percent per annum or the annual growth rate. For example, 3% per annum simply means that there is an increase of 3 persons for every 100 persons in that year.
Now that we have seen the various calculations of birth rates, let us find out the causes for the growth of the population in that country.
This graph points out the population of India between 1901 and 2011. We can see that there is a sharp decline in the death rates. Later, the developments in medicines like vaccines and antibiotics led to improvements in healthcare. As a result of all these advancements, the death rates came down when compared to the year 1900. The high birth rates along with the decreased death rate led to higher rates of population in the country.
We can see that the birth rates also began to come down, which resulted in a decline in the rate of growth of population in the country.
This table shows the magnitude and rate of India's population growth. It is an exercise for you to fill in the missing numbers in the absolute increase in the annual growth column. From this table, we can see that highest of 2.22% rate is recorded in 1981.
Students, what do you understand from this? The graph clearly points out the percentage over each decade of population. The total fertility rate, which is the number of children that is likely to be born to a woman if she were to live to the end of her childbearing years and bear children in accordance with the current pattern, is an important factor in understanding the trend of population.
A low fertility rate points out that the couples are deciding to have fewer children. This decision may be an outcome of individual as well as family decisions. While the fertility rate of India was more than 5.6 in India in 1960, it points out that on an average, every woman was likely to have 4 or 5 children.
It is the family that decides the number of children they want to have based on their economic conditions, security, opportunities for the children and other social norms. But students, the conditions gradually began to change. Let's see how.
The fertility rate in India currently stands at 2.7, which means on an average each woman is likely to have 3 or 4 children. The fertility rate of Andhra Pradesh is 1.9. Another important element that contributes to change in population is migration. Although internal migration may not change the numbers of population, it is an influencing factor in the distribution of population in the nation. The migration is an important factor that changes the composition and distribution of the population in a country.
Students, we often hear people talking big about the growth of population with a view that there are few resources and too many people using those resources. But what should be kept in mind is that is the families that decide the number of children they want to have depending on various factors. Moreover, we also see that the families with large number of children are poorer and are not able to afford the basic necessities of life too.